When I think of dirt, I think that it's going to be full of germs.
I would say I'm probably somewhere towards a conservative, clean freak.
When I was a kid, it was sort of like constant vigilance against what people put in their mouth, washing hands, don't touch this, that's dirty.
I remember learning about microbes in a 7th grade science class, and they taught us that microbes were germs and that they were essentially bad for your health.
We like to keep the things that we own as clean as we can. That's why Dan is cleaning his bike. It looks much better now, but his hands don't. Now they need cleaning. Dan washes up because, for one thing, the soap and water are washing away microbes.
Microbes. I don't think about microbes, nope.
As parents, we all just want to keep our kids safe. I don't think we ever stop worrying about them. But some of the trickiest worries are about things we can't even see.
We like to keep the things that we own as clean as we can. Dan washes up because dirty hands don't look very good.
Before the internet, that's how we learned about important issues. Have you learned anything?
Nope.
What were they trying to tell you?
Dan needs to wash his hands because his hands are dirty.
Definitely old school. So what does modern science tell us about germs and microbes?
Microbes are everywhere. They're in deep sea vents way under the sea at high pressures. They're in lakes 1,000 feet under the ice. They've been here long before we were. And they built this world as we know it and contribute to all the life forms that we see around us.
Microbes are actually part of our physiology. The way we develop, the way our organs and our systems develop in our body depend not only on functions that are encoded or produced by our genes, but they're reliant on our microbes.
There's at least as many microbes in and on us as there are human cells. They're so numerous, they outnumber the number of stars in the galaxy.
We all have around 35 to 40 trillion bacterial cells alone inside our bodies. Most of them reside in our intestine, and they play a fundamental role in how our bodies develop and how they function. Everything from producing little chemicals that your body needs, all the way through to fighting off other pathogens, other dangerous bacteria or dangerous viruses which you would otherwise be susceptible to.
We and our microbes is not just two separate things. It's just like another organ that we have.
Microbes can produce chemicals which actually affect how our brains develop and even how we behave. Hungry may be a real thing. We know that microbes can play a role in diabetes, in obesity, in asthma, in food allergies.
In the last 50 years, we've seen an incredible decrease in the amount of infectious diseases, measles, mumps, tuberculosis, hepatitis. That's great. But in the same time frame, we've seen almost an equal increase in the number of autoimmune diseases, allergies, asthma, diabetes, intestinal disorders, and obesity.
My brother and sister had very severe chronic asthma, the type that does not get controlled easily. You almost have to put them in a cocoon to prevent them from getting sick. They can almost stop breathing, or you can see them changing color due to the lack of oxygen.
When I see Zaire in an attack, Sometimes I can't think because I'm trying to think of what to do, and there's nothing to do other than just give him the 3 medications that they've given him, and if that seems not to be working, I feel scared.
I try not to think too much about the fears, but they're there.
He is 12 weeks. I want him to be healthy and grow up to be whatever he wants to be.
There's only about 100 different kinds of bacteria that actually cause bacterial infections. Yet we have thousands of different species in and on us living on our bodies. They help our brain develop, they help our gut develop, they help our immune system develop. And when you take them out of the equation, we realize this doesn't happen. Then we started to see this rise in obesity and allergies and asthma and autism and ADHD and you pick your disease.
But how could microorganisms that live in your gut affect your odds of developing asthma, which is a disease of the lungs, or diabetes, which is a blood sugar disorder? In the next 50 minutes, we're going to talk to families, researchers, and scientists to try and figure out what's harming our microbiome and what we can do to reverse this dangerous trend. But first, a quick biology primer. A microbe is basically any living thing that's too small to see without a microscope. That includes protozoa, viruses, fungi, and bacteria. Microbes are the oldest and most successful life forms on Earth, and we've evolved with them in a deeply complex symbiotic relationship. Microbes train our immune systems, help us digest our food, and even help us fight disease. Without microbes producing vitamin K, for example, our blood wouldn't coagulate, and we'd pretty much all bleed to death. Ugh.
Turns out that you and I are basically genetically identical. We're 99.99% of the chromosome the same between us, right? And all humans are like that. What's different is they're microbes. What we're finding is that we're actually not being very good to our microbes. Ironically, our grandparents had much better microbes than we do now.
And how do we know what kind of microbes people had 100 years ago? Mostly from the guts of World War I soldiers buried in permafrost. And even further back, from frozen Viking latrines. The microbes in these samples are totally different from what are found in modern European populations today.
In the past century or two, we really have been cleaning up the world. And there's been really drastic changes, not only in the type and the number of microbes that we get to live with, but also the consequences in our bodies.
We're missing these essential microbes that we need just to live normally.
And that leads to disease?
Yep, there's a lot of data indicating this does. You can take mice that don't have any microbes, their brains don't develop normally, their immune system does not develop normally, their gut doesn't develop normally. And what we're now realizing is that many of these diseases have screwed up microbes, and in several cases we're showing that the screw up of microbes is actually contributing to the disease.
So what happened? If the rise of so many modern diseases stems from our kids missing microbes, the ones that our grandparents all had, where'd they go?
In this one generation, in about 30 years, the rates of asthma have quadrupled. That's huge, huge numbers. And it can't just be genetics because my mum's genes aren't particularly different from my genes. So it's something about the environment that kids are growing up in today.
We're depriving our bodies of this healthy exposure to microbes, especially when we're young.
Dr. Marie-Claire Arrieta is looking at how microbiomes in different cultures can lead to different health outcomes. In Ecuador, for example, she studied a community where part of the population got clean drinking water and part did not.
people that had potable, clean water in their homes had a higher risk of asthma. And that really surprised us because it possibly showed that it is really the microbial environment around the type of water that they're drinking and other exposures that are driving this risk. Now, of course, we want clean water because we need to avoid infectious diseases. They're quite dangerous, but we want both. We want clean water, but we also want lower risk.
Now, along with Dr. Cecilia Jimenez of the National Autonomous University of Mexico, she's looking at microbiome-related health outcomes of kids in Xochicotla, Mexico.
Whether it is a tropical forest or the Arctic tundra or our gut microbiome, one of the critical aspects in ecosystems is this concept known as diversity. Even from early ages, the microbiomes here start a lot more diverse. With the process of industrialization, we seem to have lost about a third of the diversity in our microbiome, and that's pretty huge. These kids, just like kids in North America, will play a lot with other kids, but they may do it in a different way here. They may be bare feet when they're kicking around a ball, and they're also more exposed to animals, and not just your average cat or dog. They have goats and chickens and cows and pigs even around where they live. I mean, these kids eat peanuts in preschool as a healthy snack. It's a very different way of growing up, and we can learn a lot from diversity and other components of the microbiome and their immune system.
Que los niños en los Estados Unidos y en Canadá, ellos desarrollan asma bronquial mucho más frecuentemente que nuestros niños. ¿Por qué? Porque nuestros niños están parasitados y los parásitos regulan la respuesta inmune de que nos protege del primer contacto con los patógenos. Nuestros niños, por alguna razón, a pesar de estar expuestos a patógenos intestinales, no les da diarrea y no les da asma.
Even though they are at a socioeconomic disadvantage, for all intents and purposes, these are healthy children. However, their microbiome is completely different to the microbiome in North American children and also in other Western countries. In Mexico, the rates of asthma and immune diseases like allergies or autoimmune disease are down in comparison to the rates that we're seeing in the more developed world.
Yet even within the more developed world, lifestyle differences can profoundly affect the variety of microbes that live on and in our children, which in turn can significantly impact their health.
We're no longer dying in our millions from pathogenic infections thanks to vaccines, thanks to public health works. However, removing that exposure overall may have led to our bodies now becoming oversensitized to the rest of the world. We've known for many years that the rate of asthma can be higher in the urban communities, in the cities, than it is in the rural communities, which we put down to the fact that people in urban environments were being exposed to more pollution in the environments around them. When we first started exploring the Amish populations, we noticed that that population of people had a very low rate of asthma, almost 3 or 4%, compared to the average for the United States, which is around 7 to 8%. We also notice a sister population to the Amish called the Hutterites. Both these populations have adopted a technology-free lifestyle, but the Hutterites had almost 25% asthma in their population. Genetically, the Amish and the Hutterites are the same people. They drink unpasteurized milk, they eat unpasteurized cheese, they live this ultimate, foodie lifestyle almost. However, the major difference between them is that the Amish live on their farms. Their front door is 50 feet from the barn door. The kids, before school and after school, are working in that farming environment. The Hutterites don't. The men get in their buggy in the morning, drive out to the farm, change into work clothes, work on the farm all day, drive home. And so the children living at home have no exposure to that farming environment. They have 25% asthma in their population, compared to the Amish, who are living and working on the farm all the time, who have 4 or 5% asthma in their population.
That's powerful evidence. Unfortunately, we can't all keep a cow in our front yard. So I've been wondering about my family. What do our microbiomes look like? I mean, I've chosen to raise my kids here in the suburbs. How do our microbes compare to those of families from less developed nations, or even farm families right here in the US? There are a number of different companies that provide test kits to do just that, find out what microbes are in our guts. But here's the thing, you know how we test for that?
Your poop.
It's for science.
Yay. It's disgusting. Yay.
You just swab a piece of used toilet paper and put the sample into the vial that they provide. I'll spare you watching this part. A few weeks later, I get back the results and call up Dr. Arrieta to help me understand them. Hi. Hey, Claire, how are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm great. I'm really curious. Are my family's microbes normal, or are they close to what used to be normal?
Great question. You and your kiddos have the prototypic North American microbiome. So
Is that good or bad?
It's different. We're now at a time where we can only talk in terms of associated with. We do not know if that particular bug is going to cause diabetes later on or obesity later on. We're still not there yet, but we can associate it.
So my son Finn has asthma. Is there any benefit in taking him to visit a farm?
Unfortunately, no. I mean, you're thinking of just packing it up and moving to a farm, hoping that his asthma is going to get better. No, in fact, it would probably get worse. At the same time, we do know that being raised in a farm is a protective factor. This exposure to the microbes that are common in a farm, they are able to train the immune system into this state that is not going to lead to asthma. So it seems that it's early life when it matters the most.
All right, let's dig into that a little. Asthma is a chronic disease that already affects about 1 in 12 North American children, and it's on the rise. Scientists who study the microbiome focus so much of their attention on asthma because it's often just the first of many immune disorders that cause problems.
It affects families like you wouldn't believe. Parents miss work, children miss school. I've had parents actually lose jobs because they had to take off so much time. So that affects all of society because then now the parent isn't able to go back to work because the child has been sick so often that the employer finally has to let them go. So it has large, far-reaching repercussions.
You see how much he's pouring? Keep on going. Okay. I began to see him labor with his breathing. I could literally see in his throat. I could see that. Then I began to hear it. He literally would not be able to breathe, and it would just come out of nowhere.
It's hard to breathe when I'm like that, and then my stomach starts hurting, and I feel sick.
This is an illness that's chronic that can take my son's life.
I hear children saying all the time, I don't take gym. I know I'm overweight, but I can't take gym because I have asthma. We want them to be physically active, but they're afraid to be active because they're afraid they're going to have an asthma attack and die.
We try to let him operate as a regular kid, you know, but the reality is he's not.
When the kids will be playing, I'll be like, no, I don't want to go outside, and I just stay inside.
I can't control his breathing. I can't control the medicine intake. I can't control the doctor's prescription. But what I can control is the love and the commitment that we have for one another.
2, sir. 3, sir. 4, sir. 5,
Hi, sir.
Zaire's big brother, Amir, takes really good care of him. He is always around, and like literally he wants to be around him. He comes around when other big brothers would rather have their little brother be somewhere else. How you feel?
I feel good.
You need your medicine? No?
I don't think so.
Come here, let me see. Amir is often sad because he's in the same position as me, watching his baby brother struggle to gasp for air. If I had a magic wand, my son would be able to breathe so that he could live the best life that he can have.
Asthma is the #1 reason for children going to hospital, #1 reason for children missing school, #1 reason for billing to the healthcare system is asthma. About 10 years ago, a bunch of Canadians got together and said, we don't know what's causing asthma. There's a huge increase, we've got to do something.
The Allergy Genes and Environment Network had already been looking into the causes and treatments of asthma and allergies, so Allergen, along with the Canadian team of leaders in clinical work and research, launched
The Canadian Healthy Infant Longitudinal Development Study.
The child study was developed to explore the early origins of allergy and asthma, what happens during pregnancy and the first few years of life.
One of the things that was really brilliant about the child study was that we took the stool samples from those kids when they were born, when they were 3 months old, when they were 1 year old, and we froze them down. And then we were able to compare the bacterial composition in kids who went on to have asthma versus those who didn't. And we found that those kids who were at highest risk of asthma seemed to be missing 4 bacteria. And interestingly, they were missing those bacteria in the first 100 days of life.
What are the bacteria?
So the bacteria have complex Latin names: Faecalibacterium, Lacnospira, Vianella, and Rothia. That's a bit of a mouthful, so we nickname them Flavor, FLVR.
But how would the bacteria fight asthma?
So asthma and allergy is really actually an immune system problem. And what we've learned is that the gut bacteria, we call that the microbiome, is really important for training and educating the immune system. We don't know exactly what's going on yet. We have evidence that those flavor bacteria make chemicals, we call them metabolites, and that those metabolites train up the immune system. We know that children who get more antibiotics, they have higher risk of asthma. Children born by cesarean section have higher risk of asthma. Kids who live on farms have a lower risk of asthma. So when you start putting all those elements together, one of the common themes there is actually the bacteria that live inside us.
If this were a crime show, I'd say lifestyle changes. Guilty. But lifestyle and environment aren't the only suspects. And asthma is not the only crime. Every doctor and scientist I've talked to says you can't start too early developing a healthy microbiome. Those first 100 days are crucial. There is some indication of microbial transfer in utero, but the biggest transfer happens at the moment of birth.
Birth is a very messy process. And ironically, this is important. I mean, I jokingly say that the best birthday present you ever give your kid is the very first one, and that's this big dose of vaginal fecal microbes. Boom, you're born with this. Welcome to the world, kid.
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday. That's really important because it kicks up the immune system, it gets the digestive tract going, it gets the brain going. And if you have a C-section, unfortunately, you miss that.
Between 2000 and 2015, the rate of C-section worldwide has doubled, and children at the age of 7 had a 50% increased risk of obesity if they were delivered by C-section compared to their vaginally delivered counterparts.
We know that cesarean sections are often life-saving and medically necessary for both moms and babies. But babies born by C-section really don't get exposed to mom's vaginal flora at all. Their bacteria often resemble that in the operating room or of the mother's skin. But babies born by cesarean section are at increased risk of different health problems, including obesity, allergies, and asthma.
My first children are 1-year-old twins, and they were born via C-section. And then I did get pregnant again. And because it was so close together, it's really not recommended to have a vaginal birth because there's a possibility of uterine rupture.
I had a complete preview with her, so they had to do a C-section for that one, and there were some complications. So then the doctor recommended a C-section for Liv also.
I've worked with kids that have had health issues, and even the minor ones. It's a lot for a child. It's a lot in school. It's a lot for the parents. It can be very difficult. So if there was any way that I could decrease those chances of them having health issues, I would do that. I think any parent would do that. I hope that they're going to be safe.
And that they have a good childhood growing up, and that nothing ever happens to them.
Antibiotics are wonder drugs. They've saved countless millions of lives. But what we now realize is that antibiotics don't just kill the bad germs that cause infection, they can kill all microbes.
The negative effects of damaging the microbiome at an early age is that you are damaging the way their immune system develops. And because of that, they can get diseases such as asthma, allergies, multiple sclerosis, even autism we're learning now, and also metabolic diseases such as obesity and diabetes.
Life expectancy today is 30 years longer than it was just a century ago, largely due to antibiotics. During the Civil War, more people died of infectious diseases than from bullet wounds. But with all the benefits of antibiotics, have we traded one class of ailments for another? Donica Markegard raises grass-fed beef just south of Half Moon Bay, California. And her kids?
Oh, it pooped.
Yeah, they're fairly free range as well. I love seeing your kids out here playing in the pond. Do they swim in here in the summer?
Oh gosh, yeah. Strip down naked, cover themselves with mud, and yeah, they love it.
It's great.
Yeah. All my kids were born right here on the ranch, and I made it a point that they would go right from breast milk to food that we either grow or raise or that we source from local organic farms. And they don't suffer from any of the common things that you see with kids, like allergies or asthma or runny noses and things like that.
Of course, this is just one family who might just be lucky. But the real reason I've come here is to talk about a simple fact.
80% of the antibiotic use in this country is fed to livestock.
Wow.
It's proven that antibiotics help growth promotion. Whereas our animals that are raised on a natural diet take a couple years to finish. In a feedlot, many of those animals might start on grass, but then they'll go into a feedlot to finish. And so with the feed rations and that antibiotic use, they can get those animals to finish in 18 months. It's a profitable way that farmers have found that they can produce large amounts of meat in a shorter amount of time.
So it seems like ranchers have known for decades that antibiotics make livestock put on weight faster. And experts confirm the same is true of humans.
Babies exposed to antibiotics, especially in the first 6 months, the first year, are more likely to develop obesity later in childhood. It's not that every child that receives antibiotics is going to develop asthma or become obese, but we do see a significant association. Antibiotics sometimes are really important and life-saving drugs, but sometimes they're also used unnecessarily.
In fact, even the CDC states that 30 to 50% of antibiotics prescribed in hospitals are unnecessary or inappropriate. So antibiotics, good but not great. Food allergies increased 50% between 1997 and 2011. And the map tracking obesity since 1980 was dramatic and a little scary. We heard earlier about the link between antibiotic use and obesity. But is there actual proof that microbes play a role in the obesity epidemic? Kids are eating more and playing and being active less. But the rates of childhood obesity have gone through the roof.
Yeah, there's no doubt exercise and diet play a role in it, but what we now realize is that there's microbes too. This field got kick-started about 10, 15 years ago when a guy named Jeff Gordon did fecal transfers. He took a fat mouse, a beast mouse, took its feces, put it in a thin mouse got fat. Fecal transfer just took a thin mouse, did into fat mouse got thin.
One simple preventative factor may be something that moms have been giving their kids since, well, pretty much since they've been moms and kids.
If there's one gift that a woman could give to her children, it would be breast milk.
When I'm breastfeeding my girls, I know there's something else going on besides just the nutrition. I think they're learning that they belong here.
Where we're from, in Guatemala, everybody nurses, everyone. And if you can nurse another person that had a child, they will nurse your child.
The recommendation from the World Health Organization is to exclusively breastfeed for 6 months and then to continue breastfeeding for up to 2 years. Today in the United States, about a quarter of moms are attaining that 6 months of exclusive breastfeeding. In the UK, it's less than 1%, and that's a problem. Breastfeeding is associated with lower rates of asthma, certain types of allergies, lower rates of obesity. The other component of breastfeeding that's often forgotten or ignored is that it also benefits the mother. Moms who breastfeed have a lower rate of diabetes later on. They have lower rates of breast cancer and ovarian cancer.
But what does all this have to do with our kids missing microbes? As it turns out, when you breastfeed, you aren't just feeding your baby, you're feeding your baby's microbes in ways that even the most advanced infant formulas aren't yet able to do.
Over thousands and millions of years, breast milk has evolved to feed babies and their microbiota.
Why is mom making 150, 200 different complex molecules at very high concentrations if there wasn't a benefit for either the infant or the mom?
We now know that those oligosaccharides are feeding the gut microbes. So they're not feeding the baby, they're feeding the baby's microbes, and that's incredibly important. These microbes help us digest the food that we eat. That's also true for babies. They generate certain vitamins that we're not able to generate on our own.
In addition to that, there is certain bacteria that are killed, or at least their growth is stopped by certain oligosaccharides.
In other words, in addition to helping your baby develop beneficial microbes, breast milk provides a natural antibiotic that helps keep the nasty microbes in check.
Breast milk is so much more than a food. It really could be considered a baby's first vaccine because it's a dose of incredibly important immune-boosting factors. Breast milk is really the original personalized medicine. Every mom makes different breast milk, and even that mom's breast milk changes over time. So as the infant grows, the breast milk changes to meet its needs. So if a baby gets sick, breast milk changes to adapt to that change. In the child study where we looked at breastfed babies and bottle-fed babies, we saw that exclusively breastfed babies had the very lowest rates of asthma, and the formula-fed babies, all fed from a bottle, all fed formula, had the highest rates. But in between that was the babies getting some of their breast milk in a bottle. We don't exactly know why that is, whether it's because of this sucking and lung exercise is one possibility. Another is going back again to the microbiome, because breastfed babies are also getting their mom's skin microbes through breastfeeding, and maybe those are important.
So why don't more women breastfeed? Well, I can tell you, it ain't easy. Oh, when I think about those days, so hard. And for many women, it's complicated.
It's a loaded question to ask a mother what her plans are for breastfeeding, because I think it's this horrible combination of it being the most natural thing in the world and probably one of the most hardest things in the world to do.
I think it's no surprise that who breastfeeds falls along typical racial and class lines in terms of inequality. I don't think I could have done it for as long as I had if I didn't have an employer that made lactation rooms available, if I didn't have the money to invest in a good pump that would allow me to keep producing when I wasn't with the baby.
My husband, he's really supportive. What can you do? He's crying, you know? Just take it out. It's like, don't care about what people say. And here I go. When he cries, I breastfeed.
One reason why we are not talking about these things very often is because it's an uneven playing field. The formula industry has a multi-billion-dollar market and marketing campaign behind it that pushes a product which is not the equivalent to human milk.
It's an issue well beyond just educating mothers. It's a societal issue. Moms have to be supported. Either they have to go back to work, they don't have a paid maternity leave, maybe they don't have the support from their family members, maybe they feel stigmatized out in public. These are all things that are societal issues that policies could help address.
The last thing we want is to stigmatize women that cannot breastfeed or choose not to breastfeed. I think we need to be sure that we have alternatives available, whether that's donor milk or substitutes in the form of infant formula. If it's infant formula, we need to make sure that infant formula is as good as it gets, and that's where some of the science needs to go as well.
So breastfeeding, if you can swing it, pretty strong recommendation. And even after that, we need our kids to keep feeding their own microbes. Yeah, with veggies. What do you tell your kids to help them understand it?
I tell them that they have a zoo. So I would say you have a zoo in you and you have to feed it too. And they like it. It's this idea that they do literally have a zoo of bacteria and bugs in their tummies and that it's almost like their pet and they have to feed it every day. Otherwise, bad stuff can happen to them and they realize it and they almost see it as second nature now.
Being a parent is hard. Just when you think you've finally mastered one level, they grow, they change, and you feel like you're back to square one. So to help me sort out everything we've been talking about, I go to someone I trust most, my own kid's pediatrician.
Hi.
Hi, Dr. Groin.
Hey, it's so nice to see you guys.
You've been with us. Maybe you guys were a day or 2 days old when we first
Just
met
new
Dr.
to the world.
Groin. Been our pediatrician for
Pretty
10
amazing.
years.
Yeah.
You can't remember? Shocker.
I remember that. I remember your mom's coming in with you guys in the little baby bucket seats.
We missed the vaginal birth part with twins, and yet I feel like we're doing the best we can. Everybody seems like they have a piece missing sometimes. You know, you have antibiotics, whether or not you were able to have a vaginal birth, whether or not you were able to breastfeed. These are all elements as parents that you're trying to keep in place, but it's hard to do them all perfectly.
It is, and it's hard. You know, sometimes people feel like, oh no, I failed at that. What's gonna happen? And you know, people are amazingly resilient, right? And so we pick up microbiome in other places. And as scientists and as doctors, we're always trying to figure out how can you help build that?
This picture evokes for me that feeling of helplessness as a parent. You know, here's this tiny little guy with a hospital bracelet on. You see that? Look how little you were. Your haircut. But look how sick he was. He just was like listless, and it was so scary for me as a parent. And I remember thinking, carpet bomb this kid. Like, whatever it takes, let's get him better.
It's tough because for us as well, we don't know, you know, is this kid gonna get better or are they gonna need the antibiotics? And often the easiest thing for a pediatrician is to say, let's just treat, right? You will never get sued for using antibiotics in the way that you might if you don't, right? Just to be blunt about it.
So this guy has had more antibiotics. He's had food allergies, asthma, he was colicky. It's all of those little signs that there's something going on with this microbiome here.
Right.
And as a parent, I feel like we're doing everything we can. You know, I can't get him to only eat kale, but I'm trying.
Not happening.
When these guys were teeny tiny, we were so worried about giving them vaccines. And you really talked us off the ledge and said, nope, this is good. This is gonna make things better.
Vaccines act by showing the body the shape of a particular kind of illness, whether virus or bacteria. So it is actually a really wonderful way to gently exercise the immune system. And the nice side effect is that when you give immunizations, the ear infection rate dropped a lot, which meant kids got fewer antibiotics, which meant less disruption to the microbiome.
Regular vaccines equal fewer infections, which means fewer antibiotics, which means healthier microbiome.
Yes.
And just to explicitly address vaccine safety,
We have a 1 in a million chance of getting an adverse reaction to vaccine. You have a 1 in 100 chance of dying of infection. I think the problem is people have never lived in the pre-vaccine world. Talk to your great-great-grandparents. What was it like when you had a 50% chance of dying before you got to school? It was scary. Every time you got a fever, you could die that day. Vaccines work. We see the experiment. These poor kids get these awful diseases that are vaccine preventable, and those break my heart because that kid should not have that disease.
yeah, so just do that and then put the ends in there, okay? A lot of the research that we've talked about so far is brand new. The field is advancing so fast. But this much we know is true. Changes in our environment, our lifestyle, our medical practices, and our diet have had a radical effect on our children's natural microbial balance. The question now, what can we do about it?
We need a reversal in the whole general way we treat microbes. Most of them are our friends. There's only a small number that actually cause infections.
There are dangerous organisms out there, and you do need to wash your hands after going to the toilet and wash your hands after handling raw chicken. But do you need to sterilize the banisters in your home? No. Do you need to use some kind of sterilizing floor cleaner? No. Not unless you intend on preparing your raw chicken on the floor and then cleaning it up and then licking it.
Watch a kid in action. What does a kid do? He puts everything they possibly can in their mouth, right? Why are they doing that? If that was so bad, they should have evolved so they stand like this and never put anything in their mouth. I'll tell you one story that drives it home. Soothers, binkies, right? Okay, so you have the soother, you put it in a kid's mouth, and what does the kid do? Spits it out, right? Okay, it's bouncing around on the floor. What do I do with this thing? I can go to the washroom and wash it off and put it back in the kid's mouth, or I can put it in my mouth and then shove it in the kid's mouth. The studies show that if you put it in your mouth and back in the kid's mouth, those kids would have decreased asthma, allergies, and obesity by this microbe transfer.
Should people be running out and buying all kinds of probiotic pills and kefir and more yogurt?
Well, I think the idea of eating fermented foods and more natural foods that might have some dirt on it or whatever, that's probably okay. Probiotics is a bit of a wild west in terms of what things work and what don't. They're not regulated, so you can pretty much claim anything you want.
This is a probiotic yogurt. The bacteria living in yogurt cannot take root in your gut. They have no competitive advantage. It'd be like taking a gazelle and dropping it in the Arctic, right? It ain't gonna survive for very long. Yes, eat more fermented foods if you want. It can't hurt and it might help. The issue is, we just don't know.
With the American Gut Project, there are some collections of stool from thousands of people who crapped in a cup for science a decade or more ago, and where we have complete health records going forward. So what I'm really excited about is the possibility not just for the microbiome to diagnose what's going on with you right now, but to be able to help you predict the future and ultimately be able to change that future.
Which brings us to...
In this lab, we take stool samples, poop, from people from around the world. Then we extract the bacterial DNA, the genomes of the bacteria present in the poop, and examine how they differ between healthy people versus sick people. And we tease that information out and use it to try and identify what makes somebody maybe develop a disease and how could microbes be responsible for doing that. The next generation of probiotics are going to be designed to go inside the body, take up residence, and integrate with the existing microbes in your gut to actually rebalance how that ecosystem works. The thing I'm most excited about trying to discover is whether there's a way to manipulate the microbiome by removing specific organisms or specific functions. We're now trying to develop ways to leverage viruses that will go in and selectively kill that organism and remove it from the equation entirely. Like assassins sneaking into the gut to kill off the one bad actor. And if we can develop that strategy effectively, we won't need antibiotics anymore. We will be able to literally walk into a situation, know which organism is causing a disease, and just wipe it off the map.
If someone had a really bad infection, how do you think doctors would treat them?
Antibiotics.
Okay, anything else?
Advil.
Okay, Advil and antibiotics.
Solitary confinement.
Maybe quarantining them. Listen to this. One of the ways that they're treating a really nasty infection called C. difficile is that they're doing something called a fecal transplant. What do you think that is?
Poo transplant?
Yeah.
Ew.
C. difficile is an infection caused by taking antibiotics. So if you treat with antibiotics, you maybe cure 20% of it. If you do a fecal transfer, you put feces from one person healthy into another person, you got a 94% cure rate.
I was in medical school about 15 years ago, and they talk about this, about fecal transplant being a potential therapy for something called C. difficile colitis. And at the time, I just thought, oh, that's so ridiculous. But there's actually documentation of fecal transplant being used in China thousands of years ago. I can't believe now I've done like over 200 of these because it's really kind of the most successful thing we've seen for recurrent C. diff infection.
She was bawling over in pain, and she yelled, "Help me." I just don't want her to cramp like that again. I love her so much, and as a mom, when she hurts, I hurt.
I have cramping and ulcers in my colon, and it's been going on for years. It's hard for me to participate in physical activity like in PE. I would always sit out. To one of my friends, I would say a fecal transplant is just where you transfer one's fecal matter into someone else's body. And I'll just leave it at that. I won't go into detail because that'd be way too much for my friends.
Olivia is such a strong girl. She's only 13, and when they're putting needles in her veins, she looks to watch them. She's not one to shy away from anything, and I hope that there's some kid out there who is scared. We'll see her as an example. She's an example to me, and I hope she'll be an example to other children.
It's remarkable to see people who've had this problem for so many years, and with something as simple as a fecal transplant, just go back to normal. This is what we're trying to investigate in our study that we're doing currently at UCSF, but I have people come to my clinic all the time with the idea that the fecal transplant is this panacea, and everything is going to get better with the fecal transplant, but the truth is we don't know. I'm hoping that 20 years from now, there's a more refined way that we can deliver therapy that restores microbial health to the colon without just transferring stool from one person to another.
Where we're going, as we affectionately like to call, is repopulating people. We're going to grow microbes in the lab, human microbes, in test tubes, so we know what's in there, sort of a drug-grade microbe, good bugs to actually fix things based on real scientific sound knowledge.
We've talked about how C-section babies miss out on microbes from mom's birth canal. But when my twins were born, sure, I really wanted to have a natural delivery, but then things got intense, and my OB said, listen, this is medically necessary for you to have a C-section. I didn't know then what I know now about missing microbes, but in the moment, what are you supposed to do?
There was a great pilot study by our collaborator, Maria-Gloria Dominguez-Bello. She took babies who were born by cesarean section and swabbed them with mum's vaginal fluid, and she saw that the babies who got swabbed, their microbiome looked more like a baby born by vaginal delivery than C-section. However, this pilot study was very small in numbers.
Now, Dr. Horrigan and her colleagues have launched a new study, swabbing hundreds of C-section babies and following their health for the next 3 years. Half the babies are swabbed with fluid from mom's birth canal, and half are swabbed with a placebo.
This is Evelyn Vukadinovich. She is 3 weeks old tomorrow. We won't know if she's in the placebo or the experimental group for a couple of years. But just the chance to have her in the experimental group was worth it.
So this is our daughter. Her name's Clara Rose. Here we are at 39 weeks, and she has not flipped. So we are here for a C-section to get her out safely. It's so surreal to think we come in as a family of 2 and we leave with our daughter. It's exciting, but I think I'm ready. My body's ready to be done with pregnancy.
We're waiting for this for a couple of years now.
This is Clara Rose Quicken. She's a big old baby. 7 pounds, 14 ounces.
She's perfect. It's something I've always wanted. And now she's here. We'll do anything in the world to protect you.
What I would say to mothers who are considering doing vaginal seeding themselves is to wait until we have better evidence from trials to know whether this is really effective in improving the baby's health and whether it's safe.
Advances in our understanding of the human microbiome are happening almost daily. But based on what we know now, we can confidently make some recommendations that'll improve both your health and the health of your children. First, use antibiotics wisely. When the pediatrician says, let's wait and watch before prescribing, trust them. Second, have a C-section only when medically necessary. Third, breastfeed if at all possible. Then, diversify your baby's microbiome with a variety of foods and experiences. And finally, let your kids eat dirt, or at least play in it, so long as it doesn't have any chemicals or heavy metals in it.
The overarching realization, I think, is that for the last 125 years, we have really tried to clean this world up. Hygiene hangover, I call it. Let's use hand sanitizer, vaccines, antibiotics, clean it up. Worked great for infectious diseases, but now I think the moral of the story is that we're really realizing we've gone too far. It's too clean. We've taken the microbes that our ancestors evolved with right out of us. You can affect your child's health just by how you raise them and thinking about these kind of microbes in their life.
Perhaps at the end of the day, one important message is that we change our frame set on how we see ourselves, and especially how we see our children, and understand that they're not just humans, but they're a mixture between humans and microbes, and that we have to understand health in the context of both human and microbial health.
I force my kids outside. I live in an area where I'm able to do that. I understand that some places it's not safe for children to play outside, but provide them with an opportunity to seek the outside world and to embrace it, to get it inside their body, to get it out on their skin, to breathe and live the life which they're supposed to live. Like my mum said, keep your home tidy enough to be happy, but dirty enough to be healthy.
I think this message is somewhat liberating to allow families to be a little more relaxed, letting their children be out in the environment, not locked up. And then some practical messages are that we want to encourage breastfeeding and facilitate that to be as successful as possible. I think to cherish antibiotics, to use them on really when we need them. And then if we can have a normal vaginal delivery and that's safe, that's probably the best for children. I want you to think about how we grew up and evolved as a species. The things that our grandparents did were probably pretty good advice.
And when the aunties and uncles are holding the baby, they're helping their microbiome to flourish? Is it that simple?
And they're loving and cherishing the child. I think this is an important message for families.
Look at me. Let him out. You think this is cake? Want some?